Get us started here. Just vote for me, in the interest of respecting all of your time to be out here on time, I want to get us started. We do still have a few votes that have not arrived, that will probably coming in the back there, finding spaces and joining us. So we'll welcome them when they get here. I first want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for coming back for session number 2. We're very excited to be here with you today. It's my pleasure to welcome you back. Again, and just want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know we're all very busy, and I really appreciate you devoting time to this effort and serving the community in this role. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the experience so far, and we're going to try and keep making it really fun and engaging as we go along. As you know, our library is a really essential resource for the community. And as we look to the future, it's important to make sure that we continue to serve the needs of the community and provide exceptional services for the future. So thus, as we have been and will continue casting a wide net to engage the community in the process to gather as much feedback as possible in this visioning process. And our consultant team from Very Done has been really busy in the past month. Maybe JR in particular, handling so many of the interviews, gathering feedback from so many members of our community. So we'll get an updated with that. And we'll be sharing some of the feedback and the preliminary themes with you all this evening. And I just want to thank you again for the benefit of your knowledge and perspectives as members of this group. The role you play is both to provide input and to help the consultant team synthesize the inputs that we're receiving from the community. So it's very important in this process. And we really appreciate you again. So thank you. Let's jump right in. Yes, so I think we're going to do introductions first. Okay. You handle it. Yeah. It should. Make sure I'm moving through the slides as I talk here. It has been a month since we've met, and there are a few new people in the room, so we thought it would be great to start with another round of brief round of introductions to break the ice. So if you could please share your name, and then I invite you to share one big takeaway from the last meeting or from the article or podcast about public libraries that were sent out. If there's anything inspired you. So do we want to start?
Sorry. My name is Aaron Rapp. What impressed me was just the engagement by the community and all you here, and including all the additional notes we've gotten in the emails as well as on our board outside. So thank you for all that.
I'm Lisa Parker. My takeaway was what I thought that what I was expecting and was unexpected, and the youth section, the teenage population, and how they are the future, and what the input that was given, and how that might be shaped. That was kind of good.
I'm Katie Hamachek, and one thing that jumped out at me from article that was shared as well as another book I was reading was just how different libraries are expanding their definition of how they're serving the community and shifting their services as needs shift. Still of course, but
Liz Hartman, I was impressed with the expansive thinking and the just dedication to making this a successful project.
Madonna Lisa Chan, and I really enjoyed this, how we were building these ideas together and in our little groups. I just thought that was nice to be able to help each other grow an idea.
Ami Joshi, I did not have the honor of being here last time, so I'm here too, but I can be here for today.
I'm Katie Abbott, and one of the things I think was around this idea of a library more as like a community center and thinking more broadly about what can be included as resources. I know between our meetings, I was in another town and visited their library section and was kind of impressed by looking at the library as a piece of the heart of the community. So it was fun to see that process.
I'm Donna Jordan, just sort of to build on what Katie said. The interesting thing to me is that for many, many years, as I've been involved in the community, meeting rooms, having meeting spaces, having spaces available that are not owned by someone, so they're charging you rent to be there, but there are part of community spaces to hold nonprofit type meetings or group meetings is something that has been talked about for years, and it's still being talked about as the library, could provide something like that. And I know like the Walton Library has some meeting rooms that they offer to their community. So they're not big, but they are there. And so it's certainly a feasible and possible thing to do.
Okay, Aaron Hollinson. I really enjoyed just hearing the diverse ideas that we had, but also, you know, even though we had a lot of different ideas and backgrounds, it was kind of fun to see at the end, when we boiled it down, like, it's like 3 things we saw, those were all actually quite similar. So that was fun going through that process, and seeing how.
Lisa Hall, and I echo what Erin and some of the others have said, the energy in the room and the visioning and thinking ahead in terms of what it could be, and also building on what we currently have. So I want to make sure I say that we have a great library, a great staff, and it's building on that foundation. So it's really exciting.
I'm Patrick Walsh. I'd say the thing I was most impressed by was just the thoughtfulness and kindness of people in this room. What they said and were willing to share, how vulnerable people were willing. It's nice to share space and be in a community with you all, and people also the full site. So thanks for being with me.
I'm Liberty. Something that has continued to stick with me as I've become increasingly fascinated with everyone else's libraries. And so I've even just like, I think from Aaron talked a lot about libraries all over the world and just seeing how different people use them and just being inspired that it's kind of like what you all were saying about, it's not necessarily just dedicated to what we think a library is, but what it could be. And like, I liked the idea of the community hub, that it's kind of like the center point of feeding heart.
I'm Christian Singh, and the takeaway for me was just like the big theme of accessibility, which I really enjoyed. And I also am enjoying this experience, but I've never really done anything like it before. It's exciting. I'm Chloe Yandon, and something I took away was the idea of information resources. Very different groups and anyway. We won't put you on the phone.
That'll be fine.
I'm part of the staff team, and I just thank everyone for being here. It's been an amazing experience, and I think the thing we've heard from staff, community, the different folks areas has been really the desire to gather, whether that be the space or the virtual connection.
Rich Arpich, I'm part of the library staff, and I'm new to Lake Oswego, so I really enjoyed learning about this community and what your value, what you see, what you need. So thanks for having me.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Moore from Henneberry Eddy Architects, Portland, and I worked with Rose Library. She convinced me. She didn't have to be unconvinced. And I actually worked with Melissa, staff renovation a couple of years ago, but a lot of. So I've got a lot of library experience, and they asked me to come and kind of blow the cap off. Showing you library designs and trends from around the country and some little seeds from along the way. And so what you're saying right now, really, it's got me really eager to share this. So it's just everywhere.
Hi, I'm Jason Gang with Barry Dunn, one of the consultant team members, and it's great to see everyone again from our last meeting. And I think what I'd like to share is that, you know, our practice has about 100 of these activities going on right now around the country. Your staff team here is challenging us and our process and our thinking in such an amazing way of pushing the envelope about every day. You know, haven't thought about this. Couldn't we do it this way? What about this follow-up? So I just want to share with you, genuinely very impressed by the team and staff and really pushing the envelope on practically everything. Did you agree, JR?
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, my name is J.R. Clanton. I'm with Barry Dunn. I'm a consultant working on this project. And I've been doing a lot of work in the background. I've been doing a lot of interviews. I've been doing a lot of collection of the online data, social pinpoint. I've been doing a lot of the stuff behind the scenes.
And one of the things I'm really excited coming into this process from the last one is just seeing some of the common themes that you all talked about as a group being reflected in the community interviews and the social pinpoint survey. And so we, we've reached, there's still a lot of outreach to do and a lot of outreach will be going on, but we have reached a point where we're starting to see some pretty prevalent themes pop up. And I think it's really going to guide our discussion about the vision of the library moving forward.
Melissa Philly, I'm the library director, and I totally agree with what you just said, JR. I mean, I haven't been involved in all of the interviews that you have and all the collection, data gathering that you have, but in the, meetings that I have been in, there's a lot of similar themes. And so that's just really cool to be in a different space with different group of people and hear those, similar themes come up. So, very exciting.
I'm Mel Diamond, I'm with the library staff, and I'm working behind the scenes to coordinate these events. And I wear two hats, because I'm library staff, but I'm also, lived in Lake Oswego for over 20 years now. So it's just wonderful to hear this feedback from our community to support the library.
I apologize for being late. So what am I supposed to answer?
Thank you for being here. First, I invite you to share your name and then a big takeaway from the last meeting, either here or something interesting from the article or podcast about public libraries that was shared out.
My name's Cindy Glazer, and I actually worked at the Lake Oswego Library for 15 years. And my takeaway was, after being retired for 3 years and away from the library, listening to all of you and reading the notes and then reading the summary was really interesting. And I see going forward, this is going to be wonderful. So thank you all.
Hi, I'm Kami McLaren. I was also late at this. I just went back to my family and my team at school and just started getting the word out a little bit and just realizing how much input we do have, it seems, and how exciting and global it appears. And I'm excited for it. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, I'm Kathy Inman Behrens, longtime resident. And the thing I was really struck by was the intergenerational quality, not only here in this room, but also when I was thinking about some of the teens talking about needing, like being a little far away from the library and how can they get access to the library. And I loved our conversations about buses and just maybe a shuttle for the library. So I'm just thinking about the intergenerational quality of the library.
Doing this for 12 years, and I think I have the sustainability and they will be added on.
And I'm Ruth Metz, I'm part of the consultant team. The thing that impressed me last time was just the caliber of this task force. The fact that so many people were interested in the community and even being on the task force, and then how well what you brought to the table last time, how well you worked together, how forthright you were. And I have a lot of confidence in you to help us process all of the information that we have. So thank you. Looking forward to today.
Well, before I turn it over to Ruth more fully to take us from where we left off, I just want to remind folks of a few housekeeping items. We do have breaks planned into the agenda. Right out these doors and to the left, there's a set of restrooms. Please grab food. If you haven't yet grabbed your meal back there, take care of your needs throughout the meeting. Let us know if you need anything. And just a friendly reminder that this is a public meeting. And then I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ruth.
Okay, great. We wanted to start with, not everybody was here, but of course, we're gonna leap on and keep going. And we've set up today to do that. What we did do, and just as a point of departure, is we took these ideas, what you see around these in the sets, there are 4 sets of these, are the things that you said about why you didn't get a task force. They were things that you said about your vision, your community, not the library, but for the community. What you saw as challenges, what you saw as needs, what you saw as opportunities. You captured that. And then you began to talk about those preliminary goals. And those then went to the staff the next morning. And the staff worked on that and created, saying that, to them was, what are you hearing? You know, what are you using? Don't impose on it. What do you hear? What are you hearing? And so that's what the staff did, and that's where this table came from. You would have got an email that includes that, but we are putting it here because you're gonna work with it again. But just to let you know that what we did, where we left off, and this is where we left off, that's where we left off with this group, this is what we did with it, with the library planning team. And in addition to that, we asked the library planning team to help us do a kind of report card about how well positioned the library is now and might be in the future to fulfill these emerging themes. So we're not stuck on these themes. We're going to ask you to work on them, especially in the last segment of today. So just wanting to let you know where we stand. That's where we left off. And I think then we are moving into, all right, what else is new? So you'll come back to these later, not to worry, but now we're leaping into what was all that JR found out and Jason, as they've done the interview, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you. So, this project has a really robust engagement, and it's really at the core of what we're providing here in the city of Lake Oswego. We are trying to engage the entirety of the users, non-users, hard to reach populations, and all sorts of demographic ages. And so to do this, we are having a multifaceted. So we launched the Social Pinpoint website a month ago, which is the online survey tool, the online community forum tool, as well as a place where you can download the presentation we had last time and find out about upcoming events. We've conducted more stakeholder interviews. In fact, as of this afternoon, that number is now 32. So we are continuing to conduct stakeholder interviews with a wide variety of different people. We also are conducting community forums. So that's we had one back in February. We have one tomorrow and another one on Saturday. We have a whole slew of marketing materials that we're pushing out, and I'll let Jason talk about that in a minute. Comment cards and real-time feedback. And the whole point of this, I want to say we still have 7 weeks of outreach left. And so in a little bit here, I'm going to go into our findings and talking about what we've been hearing and what the community is telling us, and you all will be able to process and digest this. But this cake is still baking, okay? This is not a finished product yet. We are not done outreach yet. And so a major component of this, a major ask we're going to have of you as a task force group is to please spread the word about this project. Please give out this marketing collateral and please help get the word out, because we're still gathering information and this is still a critical phase for us to continue to push it out. Jason, we talked a little bit about the collateral.
So, we didn't quite have everything here like the last meeting, but we do this time. So if you are interested, before you leave this evening, we have things like postcards to hand out to your groups, and it's okay if you take a stack of them. We can print more. Don't worry about that. I'm not kidding. We want to print more and provide more. We have things like coasters, and actually some of them are out there. You all should have one in front of you. So perhaps like a restaurant, coffee shop, things like that. And again, grab a stack. Yeah. Just contact one of those places, say, hey, do you mind, hey, so-and-so, do you mind if I put these out? You have those opportunities. The bookmarks you see in the back, we certainly have more of those. We also have some, large posters in the back. That might be a larger ask, but it's a combination of having, directing people, depending on the specific collateral that we're using. Judging by how much time typically someone would spend with that collateral or the engagement collateral. It's either gonna direct them to the city's website along with the social pinpoint that Jared's about to go over results. Or it's gonna direct them to the question. It's a real quick question that talks about the future of the library, and we're so far doing, I think, pretty well, but as JR said, I think today we have some really great themes for you, to discuss. But we definitely still have 7 weeks left, so there's still a long way left, so we want to really emphasize that. Please do the best you can in helping us get the word out, we really appreciate it, thank you.
And we brought bags.
Oh, yeah.
Two bags.
To bring all the stuff out, the rain, yeah.
So for real-time feedback, did you all talk about that last time, what real-time feedback is and what the difference is? So if you all take a picture of the QR code on this poster, instead of taking you to a social pinpoint survey, it will actually take you to a website that has one question on it. And the idea of that is we give these types of items out when we're trying to capture people who might be on the run or out now. They're not really going to sit down and give us a full time fill out a multi-question survey. But maybe they'll have time to take and answer one question. And so that's what this would direct you to. And if you've seen we put signs up in some of the parks around town. And that's one of them too. That's where this QR code goes. So there's two types of data collection going on right now through the QR code, social pinpoint, and this other tool called real-time feedback. And so this is just a bit of a summary, a snapshot of time. Social pinpoint, you're getting close to 2,000 visits, 180 survey responses. And then the interviews, we collected 944 comments so far as of the time I updated this slide. And again, these are just some of the collaterals that are out. So then we get to what I've provided. And I am giving you all some summary information from the social pinpoint site and some summary information from the. This is not an exhaustive. This isn't every single question we've asked in social. I need to emphasize again that this survey is still going on. So consider this a snapshot of where we're at, and the people who have currently taken the survey. Along with trying to get information about what are some of the things that are trying to pop up. Realizing still continuing this is coming in.
We printed these out, someone not have one. We have to give you one, we have a couple extras.
Should be one of every.
Great. And the other reason we gave you all copies is so you would have copies when we break out into our discussion groups and all that kind of stuff. So this is the distribution of neighborhoods people identified they live in when they took the survey. So it's actually a pretty decent distribution. We're getting representation from a lot of the different neighborhoods around town, which is I actually think that's pretty good and pretty interesting, given that the library is located on, very much so not in a central location for this community. So the question is about what do you like about the library? The point of the question was to go with no more talking about in the future. You probably want to consider doing the stuff that people already like, making sure you're continuing to offer the services. And the collection would be the collection of that and the other good popular. When you both want to continue, collections very popular. The dual collections and resources are very popular. The people who really like it. What's on the various library? What's for them to be doing? by far the most popular event, so I think we're a big far than, driving and walking distance to library. And this makes sense. If you remember from last time we met, when we talked about drive time analysis, you have elements of the city that are over 15-minute drive away from this library. And 10 minutes is really the magic number you want. 10 minutes is people will alternate driving habits and life patterns if you can meet them within that 10 minutes. And that's for everything, public transportation as well as going to buildings, such as libraries. And then what do you want in the future? A lot of these were honestly architectural type things and many things in the building. And that's definitely gathering spaces, different types of building renovations and amenities, those type of things are showing up quite a bit. So then we started talking about so that's it for the survey report. Yeah,
Let's go back one.
yeah, of course.
So I apologize, I've not taken the survey,
Yeah,
but are these user inputted answers or are these predetermined answers that people were selecting on the survey? Like, was public meeting rooms like a predetermined thing you could select to choose, or people manually inputting what they like and then just collected everything together and put it in buckets?
yeah, it's predetermined. There isn't, so they can select from a list what they want. And then there's also a other, and if they select other, they can fill that in.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other, sorry, I know I'm going kind of quick here, yeah.
Were any of the others captured? Were there like really interesting themes that weren't on the list?
The others, yes, but I don't have that report ready to give to you all, but when we do close this out, you're gonna get a pretty exhaustive list of Wednesday.
Awesome.
Now, I want to talk a bit about the stakeholder interviews and some of the things that we are doing that we're identifying in there. So when we do stakeholder interviews, we write down what people tell us verbatim, right? And we don't fact check it. We don't try to, set the record straight if they give us anything that we disagree with or we think is wrong. That's not the point of the stakeholder interview. The point of the stakeholder interview is to capture the thoughts as they're given to us. In a lot of ways, sometimes it's a perception exercise, but people's perceptions are a lot of times their reality. And so I'm saying all of this because as we start going into themes, I put under each of these themes actual quotes that I collected. So this is not me wordsmithing these items. These are actual quotes from the interviews that I thought captured some of the themes that we are hearing, said multiple ways by multiple people. So as far as challenges go, you have the four, big themes that I thought would be good to talk about tonight are affordability, population growth and what the implications of that have been, infrastructure, and then what we call disparities between, served and underserved. So under affordability, a lot of people interview when we ask about a challenge in the community, they bring up it's expensive to live here. It's expensive to rent, to own. And there's this theme that a lot of people who just work here and can't afford to live here, especially in service industry. Population growth. And then a lot of people, this is worked in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it comes along with that same theme of infrastructure. But there's this idea that, the infrastructure that exists within the city wasn't set up for the density that the city currently exists at. And the implications of, a different population living here now, well, isn't really helpful. And then we talk about various. And these are themes that are called the ones on the LO. Again, demographics are changing. A lot of communities have talked about Lake Oswego's history and its past and what impacts that history has on the current makeup. Whether it's something people are conscious of or not conscious of. And so, again, with all of these things, these may not be the perceptions that everyone at this table feels, but these are perceptions that some in this community feel and have reported to us as we collected this data. Any questions or comments about the challenges? Oh, great thing. Sorry.
Who are stakeholders? How do you define it?
Yeah, there's three main groups of stakeholders that we're interviewing. There's what we call external stakeholders. So these would be people who do not work for the city. They are members of the community. Either they live here or they operate businesses or they're government agencies or partner agencies for the city. So those are what we call external stakeholders. Then we have city staff, city departments. So we interviewed other department heads, the city manager, and then library staff. So that would be our city staff. And then,
Council and boards.
what's that?
Council and boards.
Yeah, sorry, and then councils and boards. So then, thank you. So then we actively interviewed elected officials and then boards, appointed boards. And, so for some of these, so we separate them into those three types of groups so that we're getting not just staff's perceptions, not just residents' perceptions, and not just business owners and local NGOs, those types of things. Yeah.
So this is collective across those three groups.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just curious, and you don't have to give exact answers, but I'm curious how much of a gap there was in any of those groups. Like, was it pretty consistent, or was there sort of obvious differences in how their perception of the community is?
A really good question. It's a really good question. I think so. For people who were, so for groups that were more aware of the city's infrastructure needs, infrastructure was definitely a bigger topic. For people, especially when we interviewed groups who, LA, well, what is the anti-racism group? LA Respond to Race. When we interviewed some of those groups, some of those inequality, equality themes came up much more. But even still, there's still themes that were pretty universal throughout. And I think when you guys get the final report, you can actually see it. And we're also going to give you, so you'll have a list of all 1,000 comments. Of course, by the time we're all said and done, it might be 2,000, but you'll see the things that were identified. Yeah. Well,
Is there any group you feel like you're not hearing from that you would like to hear?
Yeah.
And can we help with that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the ones that we're really trying to get right now, we're trying to arrange some group discussions with the schools and trying to really capture some of the school populations, both parents as well as the kids. And so I know one of our consulting team, Dr. Christine Moses, who works for Buffalo Consulting, she's been arranging a lot of those conversations. And was there any other groups? Yeah.
And I was thinking more on the staff side, so I've been trying to arrange an interview with a staff group at both a group of private school, like daycare preschool providers, as well as a public school. And the folks are just so busy. So we're still really I'm feeling very confident that we'll be able to make this happen, but they're very busy. So it's been more of a challenge.
The other group, and this is something we struggle to see all the time, it's just people who don't interact with the city. So your neighbor who's just busy going to work, where that's a lot of what the business outreach is, so that people, if they're out at a coffee shop, they're seeing stuff like that, because you don't necessarily have to interact with the school district, with the city, with Parks and Rec. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities that just simply don't overlap with us, and that we can't necessarily identify every single resident in the neighborhood. We do send out the Hello and Parks catalog to every single household and business, but I'm not gonna say everyone reads that. And so I think it's really the kind of we don't know what we don't know, and that's that group of, we don't know if they're reading that stuff or not and seeing this.
Can we put signs at the grocery stores?
Yes, we did. Not every grocery store that accept a sign,
That would accept it, okay. And post offices, or even just
Coffee shops, coffee shops.
restaurants, and the different plazas.
Yeah, any kind of city organization that's accepted.
I think I'll add on to what Madison said about engagement, because we deal with this at the council level all the time. Typically, what you see with those that want to give input on an issue is if the city is saying, hey, we want to fix something, or we have a project. Typically, the people that come forward with suggestions are the ones that have existing problems with whatever it is you're trying to fix. You rarely get people who are ambivalent to it, or, hey, everything's great, I'm having an issue with it, so why would I want to give the input, right? So you tend to only hear from people that have, I don't want to say an issue with it, but have ideas on how to change it. And so it's naturally going to skew to the laundry list of stuff, right? So it's hard to get a real good balance. That's one of the challenges we have at the staff level, the council level, so.
We sort of said a little earlier that if this were a discussion about, we're going to close the library and let's.
Social experiment.
I was just emphasize, that comes back to maybe a role for an opportunity for you. Don't get me wrong, you're already doing so much by committing this time. But a lot of that is simply relationship driven. So if you have a book club or you're talking about whatever, you just hand them a postcard or send that email and say, hey, I'm doing this. Do you mind commenting? To us, that's usually that's the magic of these relationships you have.
Or if you're on a Facebook group, like, I'm mom's groups on Facebook, I'm on those. When the Portland puts ballots on, I always send it out on my WhatsApp group with all my indoor soccer friends, and so, you know, it doesn't have to be the structured ones, it could just be like your neighbor who you see, be like, hey, you might be interested in this.
And next door, although I advise you not to.
Enter at your own risk, not next door.
Yeah. Do we have a definition for what would a successful outreach effort would consist of? So in some of the neighborhoods, I think there were 13 listed up there, but there's over 30 in LO. So is it the majority of neighborhoods or a certain breakdown of demographics, whether it's socioeconomic, or racial, or geographical, or whatever? Have we defined what that looks like, or is that a?
I think some of the benchmarks we have is, we do this work in a lot of cities, so get an idea of a population size and an engaged community, what does that typically look like? The other thing is we've looked at benchmarks for things like, when fireworks or pickleball was a survey question, and those numbers are high. And it's wondering, we know this community is really genuinely highly engaged, very digital, wants to provide input, but it's sometimes the question we're asking. So going back to your question is, there's a lot of ways to analyze that. And one of the things that I want to reiterate, we're really proud of having Dr. Moses on our team, living here in Lake Oswego, being an expert in inclusion and those efforts. That's really helping for us to take a step back and understand that opportunities to better connect people. So I'd say so far so good. And that's what I was actually telling, we talked about Madison in our last meeting. So far so good. We feel good about where we are, having 7 weeks left still. Those numbers compared to other specifically library programs are actually really, really, really good right now. But we don't want to send the wrong message tonight. We're sending the message that we need more, a lot more. And we're hoping, again, we have a lot of you already. We're hoping there's ways you can help with that.
Yeah, I think what I'll add too is, we're making an effort to get to all of it. So I would love to see every neighborhood represented by the end. Social pinpoint is in itself, this is not a statistically valid survey. And I think it's really important that we remember that. This is not a statistically valid survey. A statistically valid survey would have cost as much as this whole process. And so what can we do as an alternative to a statistically valid survey? And hey, maybe in a lot of ways get something different that has other advantages. And so we have this multifaceted engagement effort where we are collecting stories and comments from people, but actually getting to go in depth in discussion with them beyond how are they interpreting this one question? And the amount of comments that we are going to have from the comment cards, the visioning boards, the social pinpoint website, the other category on the social pinpoint survey, all of the interviews with the stakeholders that we're doing. And then a group like this that's meeting to really discuss and digest these findings as we move along the journey, combined with our forum efforts, all of that is going to give you, it's different from a statistically valid survey, but it also is going to give you a lot more story and context to digest. And in a lot of ways, I think that what we're extending and the reach we're already having is pretty successful. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a hair salon and I've been there 21 years, so I had the posters out and at the end I hit him up, I'm like, hey, by the way, you owe me. Yeah, do this, and like you said, oh, I don't wanna take a survey. I'm like, keep it light, just answer the questions, there are no wrong answers.
Right.
Just keep it, just off the cuff opinion, you're just collecting data. So that's exactly what people really have, this visceral reaction of like, oh, I can't take a survey. Will my name be attached to it? I mean, we're all hyper critical of ourselves. It's like, it's just a vision task force that I'm on, how we're gonna shape the way our community gathers, and we just want your input. So maybe we can come up with some holler back sentences for people, like just keep it light, just throw an opinion out there, because we're trying to just shape the vision of what it is. There's professionals leading the boat here. We just want to know how, so you don't have a big brouhaha about stuff, So you just need data.
Exactly.
Yeah. What in your experience in the last year, was it hard to get there? Was it closed when you wanted to go there? Was there no parking when you wanted to pop by?
When we think about how we're helping encourage people to participate in the survey, and also if we can connect dots for you on the stakeholder interviews, how long, and I'm like, did I take the survey? I can't remember. How long would you say like the survey takes to complete? I feel like time and investment is big for people. And then also how long are the interviews?
The interviews are 30-minute interviews. Unless you get someone who doesn't want to talk much, then they can get shorter. That sometimes you get people who don't want to talk, and it's longer. It's just, but 30 minutes is what we say for the stakeholder interviews. For the survey, I know we call it a 3-minute survey.
Just 5 minutes, I feel like it's a really good time.
Yeah, like you're not gonna get, this won't go on your per-minute record.
Or this one, how to do this one, which is.
Yeah, exactly. 2 questions.
I'm down to about 10 minutes, and I want to keep us going because we have 3 more of these to go through. So then the next question we ask when we're talking to people in the stakeholder interviews is we ask them, what do you think the role of the library could be in addressing the challenges we've talked about? And so some of the themes that we're hearing, the quotes from people that fit into, if we had to categorize them, these are some of the things that have really started to come to the surface as common themes. Welcoming for everyone, trusted source for information, a place for learning and a place for gathering. And like I said, I'm starting to see a lot of connection to the themes that you all are also identifying. So then the other questions about roles, or you'll discussing this in more detail later too. So then we talked about barriers to access. So like what's preventing people from being able to access library services? Location, building condition and amenities, people consistently bringing up then aside also the lack of meeting rooms and the lack of an ability to really gather there. Keeps coming up again and again. The location not being accessible, as accessible by public transportation or sidewalks. Awareness was one that came up quite a bit, and this is common in all libraries everywhere. If I ever work with one where this doesn't come up, I'm like, not all that secret. Yeah, well, they're secrets. It's very consistent with we didn't know the library did that. We didn't know you all provided that. Oh, that's so cool. And, you know, how many times do we get recommendations? Hey, it would be great if you had, you know, ebooks and things like that. Like, it's, how do we actually, how do we spread the, how do we spread the word? And the only thing I can, the only answer I have for this is that your community and library group is a complex user group that all utilizes the library in different ways. So you have to have a lot of different ways of spreading the word about what. I also like it when people say this because it means we are reaching people who aren't our power users. We are reaching people who aren't necessarily aware of what's going on at the library. So this is part of our target audience. So the fact that it's coming up quite a bit, I think is a good sign that we're reaching the right people. Any questions about the barriers? Yeah, yeah. So people talk about the library having accessibility, you know, being able to ADA issues, American with Disability Act. There were some comments about hours, and so yeah, and also having time to go to the library. And so that is one of the options we give people to select when we're talking about barriers to accessing, because even though you might not think there's much we can do about library, about giving people more time in their lives, it does speak to the library providing alternative types of services, having more morning and evening hours to we can just schedules, and then also like what you're making available online versus you have to come in person.
I have a question.
Yeah.
To me a little. That there were 208 comments to barriers to access.
Yes.
I thought there would be more compared to, you know, just thinking about the library and the building and, you know, the footprint and resources. So that's what sort of surprised me a little bit compared to comments on the other 2 pages, 242 and 1 comments.
Yeah. You know, part of it might have to do with the order we ask the questions.
People getting tired?
Yeah, people getting tired of people, you know, maybe that could be part of it. With barriers, I also think that when you talk about challenges, the way we word the question about challenges, we're talking about the community in general. We're talking about, we say in the city of Lake Oswego, what are some challenges facing the community? We don't focus them on only the library yet. And so with the responses to that question, we get both challenges for Lake Oswego in general, as well as the library. When we get down to barriers, that's focused directly on libraries, and that's where you start getting people being, they're pretty focused. When you look at the list of barriers people give versus the list of challenges, typically that's a shorter list, but then they've got a lot more detail in what they're telling you.
And I just checked, that's consistent online too. Believe it or not, Social Pinpoint, I got it up right now. And this is the themes from the stakeholder interview, so it's very interesting. Because if you look at the similar responses and the way they're framed online, they're actually lower on the barriers. Now, there's still a lot. I mean, there's right now 142. So, the Social Pinpoint. So it's, but there's like 180, 200 other areas. So we'll see. We still have some time left, but interesting observation.
Yeah, it is an interesting opportunity.
Let's do one more thing that's, I just gotta say this, is that a lot of times non-users don't know what the barriers are because they haven't been in the library in 5 years or 10. Or I used to do that when I was with my kids and now like they're gone, you know, college or whatever. So it can be hard if you don't know. However, the good news there is that we're getting non-users. You know, we want to hear from the non-users too. So it's but I love the question, make it segment.
Yeah, very much.
Can I ask a follow-up question before you decide? So, when you're talking to the stakeholders, is one of the questions, how do you use the library? Versus
No.
people don't use the library very much. I mean, so there's going to be a distinction between, you know, sort of the responses.
Yeah.
So we have basically standard about 5 questions that we provide to our groups. But our role as facilitators is really try to facilitate conversation. So getting the best we can out of group. We don't guide those conversations or lead the conversations. We ask questions and build off whatever the direction a particular group is going. keep in mind, some groups might be just one-on-one, some groups might be 5 or 10, some groups might be much more than that, so it kind of depends. We do try to get a feel all over, yes, are we really talking to a group that's a regular user, sometimes user, or really hasn't been there in a long time? We do try to test that, yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure for to like being able to categorize the data that you're finding based on that. I think that would be a really interesting insight, like if the goal is to get people who aren't using the library to the library, looking specifically at their pain points.
So really good, yeah. I think it is an interesting data point. It is not a question, in the stakeholder interview, it's not a question they're asking. Do you currently use the library, or when's the last time you've been to the library?
Yeah, we can tell. Lots of other answers.
Do you have a plan to share the survey questions with us?
The survey?
Yeah,
Yeah, so like, you mean the responses?
no, I mean the actual prompts, the questions.
Yeah, yes, we can, it's on the Social Pinpoint website, it's the same survey that you can access currently through the survey website. Yeah, if it's useful to walk through those, we absolutely can do that.
It might just be useful to have them, because when you're taking it, you're in the mindset of responding to the questions as opposed to, what are the
Yeah, that is true. We have it printed and we have it translated into 3 other languages.
The stakeholder interviews and the SharePoint are the same. Just one is like in depth more.
Yeah, yes. Social Pinpoint has a lot more questions because it's a survey and, you know, really we ask 6 questions during the stakeholder interviews, but really 4 of those are the actual data collected. All right, well, I'm trying to keep us on schedule and we are right on schedule, so that brings us to the I guess the last one was future imperatives, and so then these were the final comments, which said, you know, in the future, 10 to 25 years from now, what does the library have to be doing to be successful? And these are some of the themes and answers that we were hearing about. I think the responses to future need ones was really interesting because a lot of people's response to this question is, I don't know what library be providing in 25 years, but I know that this library better be in a situation where it can be responsive to what they need. That the building is flexible enough, that the services are flexible enough, that whatever is asked of libraries 25 years from now, however this library is operating, needs to be able to be responding to those changing needs. And I thought that was pretty insightful. Not a lot of communities get there, you know, they stay fixated on smaller stuff. Any questions? Okay, that brings us to our,
I know we're giving you a lot of information and that's gonna happen in the next hour too. And you will have an opportunity to interact, and to ask more questions when we're working in groups, which is in the last segment. So just be patient, these are all great questions, I'm glad you're asking them. And there's more to come. So if you will, just take a 5-minute stretch break and come back, we have more to do. So it very much reaches out of itself to help people connect to the resources they want. It's their 3rd highest resource sharing for borrowers. It's the 5th highest total items per capita. That's physical and electronic, yes.
What's the difference between loans and borrows?
What's that? So loans are items that we're sharing out to other libraries that have requested items from our collection, whereas borrows are where our people are requesting from other libraries.
Thank you.
I'm gonna keep going, unless that's all right, and we'll come back to the other things. But I think it's significant in the now. And I have a speed or drawer for an item to be added. I mean, so there's a space issue.
Yes.
But there's tremendous resource sharing. The library is really using its collection well, and everybody else's, and helping everybody else use everybody else's collection. Yes.
Could you define the physical items per capita as well as circulation per capita, just so we're all talking the same thing?
Physical items are DVDs and books, physical things and everything else, you know, and then there's the electronic and the digital.
So it's basically collection size as compared to collection use. So circulation is, you know, the number of times that things are being borrowed from the collection, whereas the physical items per capita is referring to the collection size.
2 books? Or is it just like the additional collection items, like the DVDs?
Books are included in the physical items, yes.
The circulation is really useful. Yeah, Phil, please.
Just a note, being second and one of those things isn't necessarily a good thing. Second highest physical items per square foot.
That's what I was thinking.
Takes up more space for collection and not for equal spaces and different other things.
We can start comparing some of those to some of the survey data we shared with you all. You know, what do people rank highly? What do people like? People like their collection. That's what people are saying in the survey and also saying it in checkouts. So I think it's very interesting seeing that linkage.
They're outside storage too?
Outside storage for materials.
Is the whole section on the?
It is, it's all in the like.
So, yes.
Okay. Seems like what?
No, I was.
So basically, it's really difficult to determine if we are in good shape or bad shape, because first of all, you're only looking at basically at the library that we have ourselves. We don't know the size or the square feet or meters from the other ones. So the only thing that you can see in that slide is basically we have a pretty big physical item. We have pretty big digital items because I think it's just a huge number, but how that relatively compares to the ones that our libraries have, I don't know if I'm big or I'm small. Most importantly, when I'm looking at it and you are saying to me that it's on a per capita basis, I do not have the reference measure, which is, I just have a range, which is 30 to 65,000, but I don't know actually if by any means the small communities have a way larger number of elements on a per capita basis. It seems not, because we're in the first place, but it can be that. So it's very difficult for me to measure if our library is a good one compared to the population that it's serving or not, based on the data that is currently being presented.
Good point. And one thing I just want to say, we're actually not evaluating the library. We know the form of it, but that's not our purpose. What we're trying to do in this case is just look at these 4 resource categories and how well is the library positioned to deal with the emerging themes that are coming up.
Makes sense.
And so I wanted to show you when the staff rated itself a 1+ on collection, it was this sort of thing, because now, so in the future, reason they said +1, there's room for improvement, right? Is that in the future, they really need to expand the library of things and world languages collection. These are the things they're hearing from people already, and it's reinforced by what they're hearing from community. Also, they need to expand their digital resources. That's understandable, especially in the limited space that they have. And they also want to improve their browsing accessibility, which is very limited right now. So this is where we're really not trying to say, is it a good library or not? I do think some of these measures, as compared to their cohort hurdle, certainly point to that, but that isn't our purpose. On facilities, so remember I said we looked at 4 resource categories: collections, facilities. The next one, I think this is a very interesting number, and as this public service transactions, just to kind of quantify how much activity is going on. Often people used to measure libraries a lot by what's their collection size per capita, and what's their circulation per capita. How many books are people checking out? How many DVDs or, you know, how many things are they downloading or uploading? There's so much more to library activity now. All of the different forms of information, as well as programming, which is an enormous amount of what this library does, and all of those libraries that are in the cohort group, they're all heavy into that. But I think what's significant is if you take the total number of public service transactions, and by that I mean total circulation, program attendance, reference health, physical visits, tech sessions. Tech sessions are on-site computer, wireless website, all those things. You add those together in the state library reports and compare them across the cohort. Then you, Lake Oswego, is the second highest in the number of public service transactions. They're the first in terms of those public service transactions in capita, and they're third highest output. If you take those transactions and the square footage, what they're producing out of this square footage is the third highest among the cohort group. I'm going to keep going because I want to make sure we have all the time we need with David, our architect, who's all ready to talk to you about the facility. So if you don't mind, I'll keep going with this because we're going to provide this to you in the slide set. And it's something that you can look at. What I'm hoping you'll do is just kind of get a bird's eye view of how well positioned the library is and why we did this. And how this is related to the data, to your metrics. In resource technology, the cohort rankings are going right to those. It's the second highest number of website visits, the second highest number of internet, computer, and device sessions, 8th in number of internet, computers, and devices. Why? There's not space. Because when you have computers, you also need seats. You need computer space. You need tables and seats. And the 7th slowest internet download and upload speeds. I'm going to keep going. But again, what the now and the future represent is how the staff then scored these resource areas. And finally, staff. The cohort rankings, first in staffing level per capita. They're 5th in public service transactions per staff member. They're first in volunteer hours, and they're first in the ratio of professional librarians to all staff. Sorry for that real quickie, but I think it's everybody's very excited to hear what our architect David has to say about the future of life.
Ask a funny question. Is it better oriented if I stand over there? Or this matter?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, it's good. It's so odd in a room, and we're all looking at different rooms. Yeah. Just enjoying your neck. Right. Considering the calendar. I'd be asked to just talk about what the current library trends and what design elements are kind of common to 20% of the libraries, and then talk about your building. So, so what is the 21st century library? And why are they what they are today? As well known, the libraries of long ago really concentrated on one or two forms of it. And it's a much more complex place now than it has been in the past. And so there's a need to address a much broader, longer list of literacies. Nutritional health literacy, media literacy, information literacy, technology. So that's what libraries are doing now. They're filling that transition that people need. And so that's what's really what we're going to talk about today to some degree. And then well, let's just kind of, it's interesting, the survey and these are really insane. So there's common themes that you're already bringing up that are going to be talked about here. So architecture, modern libraries, a lot more light, a lot more openness, very welcoming, art and sculpture, glass, come in many forms, many shapes, many sizes. And so thinking about a new library, you might, that's been on the table so far, there might be a new renovation or something, even of your building. You know, this idea of light is so critical, in so many ways. There's like so many health studies connected to natural light and this glass. So, and then the openness of what you're inside. And then, this idea of outdoor space become much more prevalent and much more connected to the programs and services that a library can offer. Something as active as community gardens on the top right, the bottom right, just space for people to gather and have events and presentations and games and whatever. The lower left is the newer library in Austin, Texas. They have rooftop garden and an observation deck and reading deck and beautiful views of the town and hillside. And then something as simple as a patio with furniture, where people can just kind of sit and soak into the sun when it's out. Run back inside, you're just not. Or just like have a conversation that they may not know. So the opportunity to connect people. I don't want to ask you to go in depth. And then we're sure where it went, but we have this idea of how to replace spaces too, are so much more common than they have been in the past. And then this idea of the welcoming public space, right? We all know that the library is the last refuge of democracy, the democratic space where you can go into it, you can buy anything, pay for it, sit as long as you like. You can do nothing. Can't sleep as much as you used to be able to. It's probably okay. They come in all forms, shapes, and sizes, and we're just limited to some. You know, the one on the upper left is in Billings, Montana. That's kind of the lobby that you come into. So it's just like this beautiful space with light coming in, this openness to just participate immediately, just kind of sit at a table. And then on the right, let's Cedar Rapids. This is just off the lobby. A nice cafe, right? And there's those two things, as welcoming library and cafe, are the top two things besides collection. The collection was by far the most. And then just like I talked about before, the bottom right is actually a university, but it just shows the kind of university library. It shows the kind of spaces that people gravitate to, and buildings that have windows that face natural environment. That's a perfect space to be at. And then, even when you have computers, lower left together, it's still a very nice space. And then children's areas are probably the most fun. I wish I was smaller sometimes. I mean, it's a thing like they do, but they're a totally different world than we were growing up with. And so things like cubbies and puppet theaters and just things that are the scale of children, where it's their world, and we're kind of foreign to that. We're visitors, but they're like natives to it. And so that's an interesting aspect of playful scale, color, all these things that children just love and gravitate towards. That's what makes these spaces really comfortable for them. But still, I don't so often, they behave. And so, then teen area, this is the long forgotten aspect of libraries. And their teens are at best kind of squeezed into a corner of the library, or they're totally forgotten. But that's an important link to maintain, because they will grow up, they will get jobs, they will vote on enough. To kind of be engaged with the library, not just, there's a big gap being an 8-year-old to being a 28-year-old. And so you want to make sure that teens and young adults, remain engaged and in a library, so you give them life faces. So it's much more common for that. One of them left, one of my favorites is the New York Library is 3 young boys in a teen area, and they're written guitars. And they're all little, which is suffering space. And then on the lower left is where, over that, that's in Chicago, yeah, where, it's basically a gaming center for kids. And, you know, gaming has long been found, but there are so many studies now that talk about, intelligence and, being ready for jobs as you come out of school if you were a gamer. So it's really an interesting evolution of attitude towards that. And so dedicated teen space becomes a critical component of 21st century library. And then, of course, the missing link in a lot of libraries, that meeting place, that study place, that quiet space. And those are three different things. Small meeting rooms where people can kind of get together, a study space for one or two people, tutoring and things like that. And then a quiet space where you can just get away from technology. There's some libraries that the quiet space is also a technology free zone. So it's like, because you can still hear the clicking of, you know, keys sometimes you hear those kind of spaces. So all forms of that too. And then this is probably the most progressive part and the biggest change in libraries. It's these kind of multi-purpose spaces that accommodate all types of events, technologies. The one on the upper left is in Dayton, Ohio. It's a multi-purpose room. They have performances there. They have lectures, events like just open houses and things like that. So it's really interesting. And then on the bottom right is a totally different kind of gathering space, very fixed seating, but still multi-dimensional in its use because it's still available to people when there's not an event there. And that's really important in terms of using a space efficiently, is having it used as long, whenever the library is open, this space will be. Doesn't make any sense to spend as much money on a building and not use the space as much as you can. And so that's another interesting aspect. And then the lower left is kind of a typical multi-use space we're all kind of used to. And on the right is a little different. It's an amazing library. That's the basement. And it's got a sort of production studio, open seating, and then a little meeting room to the back. But then creative learning. This is kind of, you know, the goal of most new libraries is to be able to offer these things, and there are four components to this new library. And I didn't really get into that at first, but there's a collection, and then there's technology, and then there's spaces, and then there's programs and services. Those things form everything that you'll all be talking about in terms of physical space and in terms of programs and services. Sometimes those relate to physical space, sometimes they relate to digital space. And so in terms of technology, you know, that goes hand in hand with creative learning these days and the type of space and the type of programs you want to have in it. They all are linked up. And so on the top left, this is Parkwood in Oakland County. It's a good makerspace. And to refinish that, it was so disappointing because it's for teens and younger, only adults couldn't go. You know, like 30 years, because it was tied to some financing, some funding. It was specifically for kids. So I didn't get there for 3 years, but you kind of see that it's just a multiple space in some ways, but there's so much technology in it. And I think I'm sure you mentioned it earlier about flexibility is not embedding technology too deep into your building. Because at some point you're going to need to replace it. And that replacement period is accelerating. Every year it gets faster and faster. So having the flexibility for that. But some of the technology that's being integrated now are like music rooms, video rooms, podcast rooms. Those are all kind of related, but in terms of what type of space is, but these are all things that people are really, really wanting to do. And it's not just adults or teens, it's everybody that wants to do it. And then on the lower right is I don't know if it's a grant, but it's a teaching. And those are becoming more and more also because of health and nutritional literacy, right? And I was at the ALA conference earlier last year, I guess it was, and the library filmed a really big commercial kitchen and they can't keep up with the demand. Because people are so interested in health and cooking and nutrition. Right? And so that's the 21st century library. So we're gonna talk about your library, which is 40 years old this year. And in the life of building, I don't know if you can call our Stewart brand, he wrote a great book called How Buildings Learn. And in that book, he talks about the second 30 years of a building's life is the most important era because in that 30 years, it can become all the systems usually have to be replaced. The function may not function. And so it's at a fulcrum where it either gets demolished or it gets renovated. And so I'm pretty sure yours is going to survive years because of where it's located and the investment that it would take to move an entire library of all that. So this is really about how to think about it in terms of what you've got and think about it in terms of also at some point the renovation. So architecture is very much a time piece, 80s, but it's very strong and it blends in with the neighborhood pretty well. It's got a lot of nice landscaping. And it looks like it's 40 years old, right? But that's not a bad, it's just a natural, we're all aging, right? So we're all, at some point we need nips and tucks and haircuts and whatnot. And so this all slide of outdoor space. Yours is very limited. You've got sidewalk and green space. Your little area for public gathering at the front there. And then on the lower right, a outdoor space, very limited. But in nice days, you probably get shoe screwed quite a bit. And then this sort of sad little picnic table on the northwest corner. And I'm sure that's mainly staff, but staffing. It's a nice outdoor space too, right? So that's the extent of your outdoor space. I'm not denigrating your library at all. Just kind of pointing things out. Don't think it's specific. This is all the good thing. You get to your architecture. You've got really great things here. Natural light, really strong materials that are very expensive now. It's like large timber. And you've got a lot of natural light in the perimeter and some in the middle. It's just very difficult to get it in the middle. You've got some, like I said, natural materials on the upper left. You've got a lot of wood ceilings, which are beautiful. That's not one nice thing, but they're dark. And so that contributes to this sort of finds the different parts of the building. The really cool thing that just hit me was it's all this art and the display books. Just hit me like this kind of hybrid art gallery bookstore. So there's really a real commitment to both of those. And so that's a really, in some ways, very unique. Well, some libraries have art, but not to this extent. And I've very seldom, if ever, seen this beautiful kind of angled shelf with just books displayed on this. Very, very, very nice. In the upper left, just exhibits of art by teens at this point. The unfortunate part about that, it's not really accessible stairs. So in a remodel or something, I can see that's really being concentrated in a way that really has an impact. And then there's the sense of here. As you're coming in, the two-story space and the staff is right there to kind of greet you, so that's really strong. And it's welcoming in the sense that there's natural light on and a lot of seating, but it's at the perimeter. And so some of these outside of the show where that's the greatest, but these are about the only empty seats in the library at the time. And I was there like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Every other seat was taken just about on the perimeter. And then the children's area in the basement, a little dark, a little low, that's okay in some ways. But it's more difficult for kids to get, out there and all that, and navigating all that. Excuse me, and then, but this upper right area with that light, greenhouse element is really, really nice. It's just kind of buried and there's not quite enough light coming through. It's the only light in the whole space, so it's kind of like stars compared to the sun. On the lower right is the staff desk, which has this, I think, a real Goldberger kind of the similar thing. Staff likes being there. They're just kind of caught between the library part and collections and then to the back of them is the open gathering area. So they're kind of in that in between zone. And one of the aspects of that is, if you're going to have a springtime, you want that margin and sequestered to some degree for acoustics. In the corner, you've also got that kind of tiered area, which is very popular in the 70s, 80s in library design. So I've seen them a dozen times. But now they're just kind of like in the way. They like limit function of the space, they're sort of dangerous. Staff was telling me, yeah, every time we get people coming back to the steps, and it's kind of freak out. So it is a bit of a liability. And then there's a lot of books, and not many computers for kids either. So the technology part is not quick. And then there's the teen area. It's like I mentioned before, either there's no teen area or it's like carved out in one little corner. And really get a chance to talk too much about how well it's used, but it seems like it's actually not a bad spot. It's pretty good. Teens, there's this magic distance for teens to be just far enough away that you can still see them. So they feel like they're okay. We got our space, we can do our thing, and then staff can say they're doing their thing, but we can see what that thing is. And so that's the key here. They're just not separated. Even if they like it, probably. So it was it was. And then what's really, really missing is the kind of small meeting rooms, the study rooms, and everything. Although these rooms are really very fun, because you've got stacks, it's kind of insulating for the most part. And while that's a good thing for the acoustics, it doesn't set up the best space because this one person, there's two people on the left, one's legs are in the way, the other person's back is to the wall. It's not the best, and it's very tight through there too. If you had more room, that might go out. And then it's that this tax bar creating a zone, but they're also blocking light. And then here is your multi-purpose space. And I've seen it in action, and the action is like moving bookshelves out of the way, and then assembling chairs in a certain way, and then that's not exactly the state-of-the-art AV system right there. But it's it's the best you can get out of this space, right? It's the only area you can really do it in, unless you're willing to commit to a large area of your library to this, which we can talk about. Definitely say what are some inner moves, and at some point, in a renovation, what comes out to create a space like that maybe takes 30 or maybe. And so, and then this is the extent of the creative learning space. Children in the lower right, and then it's not really creative learning, but we didn't have another photo. So that's not there either. So you can see all the 21st century spaces that we showed you. You have the makings of those, but a long way to go before you get there. And so that's kind of the conversation is. What can you do with that at some point? Not right now, But at some point, what can we do with the existing building? When in consideration with the previous other satellite? And how do they complement one another? What is this building most suited to change, how to change it? Excuse me, and how to change it and what should go in it? What's the most appropriate thing to go in it? Given the limitations of the building versus what all the program needs are. And so, hope you did that.
Right. Yeah, please, if you have any questions for David or, oh, I'm trying to look at.
I know the like idea of having like a separate or an additional building has been prevalent, but how realistic and reasonable are additions to the pre-existing building? Like where are we sitting on that?
We haven't thought of that yet. There are some limitations to, we'd have to dig into, city zoning and planning requirements because there's usually, a percentage of the land that can be covered by a building. And I'm not sure what that is yet. So like some places, like in the urban core, let's call it, the street, right, Avenue A, you can probably cover more of the site than you can back in that sort of like a neighborhood. So a building can always be added to, in my opinion. Yeah. By all means. But if you have the land and the zoning and all that stuff, so when you add, something goes away, right? And the most likely thing to go away is the parking. Sort of added. So if you add like little slivers of the building, it's extremely expensive versus adding your piece of, right? So the bigger piece of building would go to the north there, where your parking is. So now you're in a conflict with an essential component, and one of the complaints is not enough parking. So that'll be an interesting discussion in the future is what can we do to that building to make it work better? And if we can't add to it, if that's a fact to address, and then what goes in it versus what goes into maybe the other one, right? So.
If I could add one more piece to it, just from a process perspective. So whether we decide to repurpose the current building where it is, or we go to a different location like Oswego, it also, there's a significant amount of community input from the neighborhoods that it's within that has to happen. And what can happen, and sometimes does happen to some people, some neighborhoods don't want anything bigger than it is before. Whatever the building is has impacts on the neighborhoods around them. Parking not just for the library, but also street parking for the people that live there. Right. Amount of trees that are cut down, amount of trees that are not cut down. So the neighborhood involvement will have a significant factor on what we're able to do with the library.
And adding to that, if I may, and look at my notes here to make sure I have the date right, but I believe it was 1974 when voters approved building the building we have at 35,000 square feet. But it was built at 27,100 because there were a series of challenges from neighbors. And that we're still looking into the data, like what exactly happened there and what were those challenges?
Yeah.
The word legal challenges has been thrown out, but I'm still tracking that trail down. But yeah, that happened already on our side.
It actually is a world where the library moves to a location. There's a world where it stays where it is and it's repurposed, and there's a world where some part of it's repurposed and there's a satellite. Right? Those are kind of the three scenarios.
I think the purpose of what they're doing here is everything's on the table. I mean, let's be honest and let's be very real. We are several years away.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the purpose of this is, hey, everything's on the table. Big picture. What do you want to do? And we boil it all up, make a stew out of it, and see what happens, see what comes out. So
Dream big.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that'll factor in is, what land is available. So Could you have a scenario where, okay, let's move the library somewhere or central, but your town's kind of a donut, right? There's a big lake, big water feature in the middle. So where is central? Where's the most central? And then is there enough land for 50, 60, 80,000, 100,000 square foot library? I don't know what the space is going to be. And then if you go to the other extreme and you're only going to renovate that building, then what does that mean? Right? Some major renovations, and what sacrifices are you making to collection, parking, neighborhood, all that negotiation. And then the third, right, it's like you've got, basically around that donut, you've got two things that might, this one's kind of move around. So, exactly. Yeah, nothing's on or off the table yet. Right.
So in your experience, what have you seen when you, let's pretend we are staying in our same, what?
Well, I know University Park Library.
I know.
We did that in 2015, and it was a 1970s building, big ducts there too, exposed structure, and the work in the bottle was collections, as it is with every library in is 40 years old, because the collections have just kind of grown and grown. So they just made the decision that, okay, this library is going to have X number of collection items. And so with that, now you've got quite as much space to work with, almost. Right? And so now you can start to move things around. You can start to put in large meeting rooms, which we did there, small meeting rooms, which we did there, children's space, teen space, and then actually lower everything down. So you're in that library, you can just see everything. So from a staff, safety, security standpoint, natural light. And then we basically moved the entry to the other side, because it wasn't the right place originally, and faced the park, and then created the square. And then that's what Oklahoma County Library decided to do. And they basically were an operations center for them, for their whole collection on every branch everywhere. They can have the collection put in there. So now every library that's not going to get replaced or renovated now has more space for those.
Do you think that's one of the biggest barriers that you've seen? Is just too much? It's like someone's when you have much.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like a horror.
I have a question for Melissa, actually, more of a current library behavioral question. How often would you say, I don't even know if there's data point on this, but I just was kind of thinking what you were saying and just thinking about use of the library. How often do people, would you say, go into the library, find something themselves, take it off the shelf and check it out versus are utilizing the staff to help them find it? Or like how valuable is it to have everything on or so much on display for people to be able to find?
I think it's very valuable. I think, we were just thinking back to those COVID times. There was a time where you had to put a book on hold and get it through a staff person. And there was a lot of outcry. Like get back in and browse, so we put up the parking lot library and worked really hard to get browsing back. When you look at our overall circulation as a percentage of items that are placed on hold, just really roughly in my head, it seems like about 75 to 80% is people coming in, finding the things independently browsing. And about 20 to 25% that they're placing on hold or working with a staff member to get. So browsing is huge. We went to an interesting study through the Public Library Association that was on space considerations. And one of the big takeaways for me was that the materials that are on display or merchandised in some way get circulated at a much higher rate. And they even did heat sensor studies in the library and found that in the stacks there were cold zones. But anything that was more of the bookstore style, on display, face out, those things, so like, the face out things, 80%.
Yeah.
Fly off the shelf and like 20% come from the stacks.
Yeah.
But it's also very unpopular. I was looking, I think it was a Gallup poll or one of those, and they asked library users, like, what would you think about putting the collections in like a closed stacks area so that the rest of the library could be more, bookstore style, gathering style, and it was hugely unpopular. So people did not want to lose that access to browsability. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in some of these other places. Correct me if I'm wrong, David, but I think in Hillsborough, they were opening another location, so those materials went
Transferred over.
and they were still accessible.
Right, they could go to the main branch.
Yeah.
and- Which was miles away, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could do the same thing with your bike, if you had two locations.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna have same collection, we're not gonna grow the collection, we have the same collection. And if it's a place, now you've got space, you're freeing up, a good place. So that's a strategic move. It's very, yeah, we're running into that everywhere. Even at Central Library, that in the academy, we're refreshing also. And in one meeting, some one was saying, well, we want to keep what we've had for so long, and I reminded them that they've only had that since the mid-90s, where the collection has been out. For the first 70 years of the building, it was closed stacks in the middle. So it's like, we're trying to go with that, because those little libraries actually have much more seating. And so what happened with the advent of computers and the stacks coming out, there was no space for other type of seating. So in the Central Library, people are just crammed together at computer tables, and that's it. There's like hardly any other seating. So it's just not a welcoming place. You're crammed together, it's just too tight, too many conflicts come from it. So.
For space and for people.
Sorry, I just noticed that Donna's hand.
Oh,
I think she could take.
I just wondered if as a part of this, there was going to be any, questions of the stakeholders and others about if you were to lose the library or even add a satellite library, where would be the most accessible place? Because a lot of the things people were talking about was as ease to get to the place, whether it was through cars or bikes or walking or whatever, adding a shuttle, doing those kinds of things. Where would that space be? Because when we talked about moving City Hall at one point, it was over on Cruise Way, and there was a lot of uproar about that, but that's actually a central population point within the city because of Mountain Park, because there's so much concentration there.
And to answer your question, that's a complete, different study.
Okay.
Because it's very involved. We actually did the bond prep from Oklahoma County's 2020 bond, and we looked at, locations for 8 new libraries throughout the county. And it gets very complicated very fast in terms of zoning and regulation and projected growth and zoning and cost, right? Cost is, yeah, right. Yeah. Is there a parcel in this area of 10-block radius that is affordable, right zone, big enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I'm just thinking, we had a lot of discussion about foothills, and now they're going to be doing things down there with the expansion or changes that are being done to the sewer system down there. And that maybe new development would come in down there and looking at an exchange of residential property for the space down there that was more compatible for a library.
Sure.
And then you'd still be on some major routes. to get there.
Part of the discussion, the essential part of the discussion will be how convenient is the northeast corner of Lake Oswego to the population, and how much of that population is a 15-minute drive or more to this. So that's why branch libraries basically started to evolve in the 1950s, just, as population growth expanded outside the city center, and then commuting back to the city center was no longer feasible for people, and branch libraries became necessary. So that's,
I will add one thing, just to make sure we're all kind of reading the same paper here. Available land, it doesn't really exist when it comes to here,
right,
especially for the size of what we have here. Foothills, great idea, but that can be a decade away from actually developing. And then what is, because I mean, NASA does this, we've been trying to find places to build affordable housing, which doesn't exist. So, and that's a much smaller footprint, so, yeah, just.
So I want to kind of reel us back in a little bit, so we get the time we need with you for the next segment. But thank you for that, and absolutely, there's been a use of library metaphor. This is a new book we're writing about the library, and we're in chapter 1. I know there's been lots of discussion about the library and developments and proposals put forward and all that. We're in a new book here, and we're at the chapter we're talking about a vision in the future. There will be a chapter on what does, given the vision that you're writing the first chapter, but it's about vision. It isn't the detail of what is the service model that we need. It might be that in your vision, you say, well, in that vision, we want the library to play these roles. We want it very accessible, and therefore it needs to have a different service, a different design, a different model. Is it a renovated current library at another location, in a mobile unit, drones? Is it, what's the service model? What's the digital overlay? Because that's changing. How do you, and so it's a very unique challenge because of the configuration of the city. What is the appropriate service model that is going to serve you for the future? Your service model now is you have a library that is in one corner, kind of segment of the community. We know it's heavily used, very heavily, extremely heavily used, and therefore, but by about 50% of the population. Well, why is that? Not because people probably not because people don't want to use it. They're telling us it's not very, and we're hearing that the driving distance is well. So you kind of put these things together. And chapter 2 might be about, well, if this is the vision of the community, and these are the roles that the library is going to play, and these are the kind of the parameters that the community thinks we ought to include, like accessibility, then what? Then maybe we have to move on to what is the appropriate service model, and then maybe you move on to how do you lay that out? How do you lay out that? And like I said, it's a very unique community with its own challenges. That's why libraries aren't the same in all, like the Colbert group, they're not the same. They're doing a lot of the same things, they're striving for a lot of same things, but they're, they have their own unique challenges, their own history, their own context. And what we have going for us right here, everybody around this room and all this input that we're getting, that's going to help us devise a vision. So kind of got to pull back. This is wonderful and great presentation, and we've got a lot of good data. We're going to have more data in the next meeting. But what we'd like to ask you to do now is come back to where we left off as a group, which is to go to the 4 corners of the earth and take one of those themes that we came up with last time, based on what you've heard, based on what you're learning, based on what you feel, begin to flesh that out a little bit more for us, right? So we have 4 group stations set up. We would like you to team up in no more than like 4 to 5 each station. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's 2, there's 1, there's 3, and there's 4. And we'd like you to take the themes in order. So group one would take the hub, I'll just, the hub concept, and the next one is the inspiration concept and so on and so forth. And you can go to the one you want. You just can't overflow. We can have more than 4 or 5, so you can make a mad rush for the station after you take a break. And what we'd like you to do is just look at those boards that you have there, consider, what you've heard today, and just take your role. If it's the hub, if it's accessibility, whatever that is, and flush it out a little bit. Okay? And we're gonna take a stretch break and then work on that for about 25 minutes. So each group is doing a group for the work. They're doing the work for everybody. And then we're gonna just report out and hear what everybody has to say. You had your hand up?
Oh, no, I
No,
just
you,
have them.
you were just, okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Does that sound okay? Really, you willing to do that?
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. We'll take a stretch break and then, Melissa and I and David. Say sorry.
No. Right? Let's start we're now at 20 minutes, please let me mind respectful time. But we're doing things. We just, again, just need to make sure we're monitoring the remaining time. So in regards, would someone from group 4 mind coming up and just sort of reading out your information? And because I'm gonna shift back and start taking notes. Someone on group 4 mind coming up, I don't think they said anything there. So. Is there, since you're going first, give a little bit more, so, thank you, by the way, but we're really asking the main 2 questions, the why and the what. Answer the question, why does the role matter in the community, what difference will it make, contribute to the community, and also what stands in the way. It's kind of where we're going, so what did you guys come up with? I'm gonna shift over there and take notes.
We spent most of our time on the why. I mean, traditionally we had a hard time with because the why is like it comes to the title for access. It's sort of self-evident. But once we spent more time kind of digging in, I think there were a few things that came up. So having a welcome and inclusive community was something that sort of permeated all the answers that we had. The idea that we would really like to have a collection that does reflect our entire community. Somebody came up with a phrase that we all kind of like, the self-perpetuating culture of belonging. So it's like, as your community changes and the books match, then, they'll start building on each other. And hopefully invites more people to come in and feel comfortable coming in and feel that they're seen. Representation is inclusivity, we wrote. Design of acceptance, we kind of took some time to brainstorm on a little bit. Why is that important? The acceptance piece. To have a sense of safety in the community, happiness in the community, bridging gaps between people and knowledge gaps. Exposure, empathy, it's a non-denominational space where everybody's welcome. And it's funny, at the end we kind of were like, hey, we didn't even really talk much about knowledge and learning, but actually that's also a big piece of why we want a space where everybody, so our entire community can all grow, see knowledge together. We didn't get to spend as much time on, I guess, it stands in the way. We talked a bit about just the challenges of getting the information and what the offerings are out to everybody. And Jason, right? Jared. Oh, Jared, sorry. I was talking about.
No, it feels better. It's my
The challenge that so many people are looking in so many different places for these things, it's a tough question to answer, I guess. Yeah, like I said, we didn't get much time. Does anyone else want to add information for the barriers?
It needs a town.
Something I thought was like, because we have kind of a homogenous community, I wonder if we're not spending as much time thinking about equity and access as we should. Perhaps it's true.
Yeah. So that's a potential barrier, is that what you're thinking?
We didn't talk about that much, that's a wondering I had.
Okay.
No one's gonna follow that example. Who's up for group 3, please? If you go in reverse, who would like to go for group 3 over here? I connect. Thank you.
Be nominated.
Good haul and toll.
Everyone else.
So that's, we have to think what they need. And the notes were around belonging, breaking isolation, leaving spaces for solitude, research and study. We dug a little bit more what that meant. I think when we came out with like our statement of what do we want in the end, with a well-supported, inclusive and empowered community. We spent a lot of time talking about how there's a lot of organizations that exist that do great things that help people that are subject matter experts. I'm personally involved in the food pantry in town, and so that was the lens through which I saw a lot of this connect piece. So it's not like the librarians have to learn how to find food and, like, there's really food insecurity. It's that if the library is a place where people are aware that this resource exists, then it builds confidence in their community, and it also makes them feel like they belong, right? So it's about being a hub of knowledge, but a different kind of knowledge, a community knowledge. And we saw that through COVID. The library was a phenomenal partner. One of the questions that came up as we were discussing this is, when someone moves to Lake Oswego the very first time, in the first week that they're here, what are the top 5 places they visit, right? And a library is probably one of them. And so when we talk about things like breaking isolation, someone who's isolated is not going to walk in one day and be like, I'm isolated, right? It's really more about putting the resources in front of people so that maybe I see it, and even though I'm not thinking it, when I encounter someone who is, I can connect those two people together, right? So relying on that community support. And so we think that the connect piece matters so much. And the standing in the way, I think, was a little bit tucked in the definitions. We didn't define it as well as group 4 or did about the barriers, but defining like what is belonging, right? What does that feel like to different people? If you feel like you look like most of the population, like maybe you feel like, maybe you don't, because even though you look like everybody, you don't feel like everybody. There's the types of belonging that are different for different cultures or DCC. And so defining belonging is probably going to be a really big barrier to try and figure this piece out. And then just things like need. So the way it's defined is connecting people to what they need, not connecting people to what they want. And so how do you know your community well enough that you know what they need? Instead of what will bring just computers, or I want a space where I can go and play my instrument. Like those are easy to define, but what are the like core needs or maybe social service needs, right? So anything else, team? No. Okay, great.
Andrew talked about inspiration. And one second, doesn't, what's your name?
Katie.
Well, Katie.
Liz.
Yes, we were talking a little bit about kitchen space first. And the conversation about kitchens was really about how many different kinds of things can happen in that inspirational image that you showed. The kitchen space where it could be intergenerational, it could be cross-cultural, it could be hands-on. That ended up being a lot of the values that we ended up expressing, that one of the things that inspired us about the library is that it helps communities progress and deal with tomorrow. And we ended up talking about tomorrow in a few different ways. So for example, we talked about the immediate needs post-COVID of breaking isolation, but then we also wondered in 10 or 20 years, will this feel as urgent? There are a few unknowns when we think about how we use the physical space, time. We were thinking about respite from screens. Will that become more urgent 10 to 20 years from now? When computing is more pervasive even than it is right now. We talked about the community values, that the community values collaboration, fundamental social value. Libraries provide a free space for such collaboration. We've been thinking a lot about that point that David brought up in his presentation about it's one of the few spaces in the world where you don't have to buy stuff to be there. And so we were thinking a lot about how that physical experience of freedom is experienced in the body and is also true socially and democratically in the library. So let's see. We talked finally a little bit about lectures, like maybe one of the things we would love to have would be a lecture space that then also would be a space where folks can hang out and talk more. So having some fluid space where you're moving between structured environment and then a less structured one. And then what stands in the way? Well, the limitations of our current library space, which can came up again and again in our conversation. And then money and available land, those kinds of too much in the weeds things that really wants us to write in chapter 3. And what subjects that I have chapter 3. So team, are there other things we want to bring to the attention of the group? No? Okay, well, that's what we did.
And the overachievers who are still writing after the deadline.
Just trying to clean it up.
Mark, which has a very long description, but the beginning of it is sort of around sense of safety, physical and psychological, systems, everyone being welcome. We kind of talk about multi-generational, intergenerational, multifunctional, those kinds of things. For us, the why was really around access to a safe space that kind of feels like that's something at a base level that everyone in the community deserves. And then a connection to each other and the community. And so that kind of, the way that we started talking about it was more like a matrix, where I think the way that it's set up today, it's very much like space driven based on which generational capacity you fill into and less about how do we connect the two generations or multiple generations together. So having space not only for peers, but also for cross connection. Another why is around hunger for deeper engagement. And this kind of ties a little bit to, I think what group 2 was saying or 4 was saying around desire to give back and share expertise, that I think it shouldn't fall only on a library to be the experts of sharing information, but also a place where people can come and share information and where you could volunteer or say if you're an expert at something and you want to teach a class and those kinds of things. Workspaces that align with how we work now and today and in the future. Kind of also connects to adaptable, agile, and evolve with technology and the community. So, not just in 5 years, but, in 20 years and in 30 years, it is the space actually going to be adaptable to that. Another part was the common desire to be lifelong learners and to be creative. So more blank spaces that can lead to more experimentation. You made a really good point about schools where it was like when you're in school, you kind of are told what to taught, and the library can be a place where you get to choose what you're taught and what you get to learn. I really liked that thinking around it. Some of the barriers we talked about similar to other people about sort of like awareness and communication. It's really hard because there's so many different needs you're trying to meet, and how do you make sure everybody knows about it and knows what the library offers. One of the barriers we identified is that it's not a hub today for 2 reasons. It only serves 50% of the population, so by definition, that doesn't make it a hub. And that just it's not accessible or central, or it is, but it isn't because we're in township. And then also kind of the way that it's set up today, there's not a space for it to be a hub because you need more of those spaces, and the ratio of like things to space for people is not in the right spot to support that. And then I think the other part of it is just like the barrier is sort of like there's so many needs to take into account, and how we haven't been able to figure out how to create value for all the different groups yet, which is I think why we're serving. So anything else? Okay.
Wow, well done. I knew you would do that. You're just super. Thank you so much, everybody. We have a couple more things, to talk about in terms of what's the tax. And I love the remote control. So, there it is.
Oh, great.